Time is 9:02, and we will call this meeting of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board to order. Today is Friday, May 19th, 2023. We welcome everybody during this very busy time of year. Mr. Castro will lead us in the pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We will now have roll call.
Sheriff Sarah Oak.
Present.
Martha Gellert Lynch.
Present.
Chance Bolton.
Present.
Yolanda Castro.
Present.
John Eichenberger. Present. Lola Escalante Castillo. Mark McElroy. Stephanie Robinson.
Present.
Mrs. Bradford.
Present.
We have two board members that are absent today, both having given prior notice. Mr. McAnally and Ms. Escalante Castillo. I would request a motion that we excuse both of their absences.
Madam Chair, I move that we excuse Mr. McAnally and, excuse me, and Ms. Escalante's absence.
Castillo.
Oh, sorry.
Second.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Mrs. Reed Lynch. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. I would just like to note at the beginning here, I don't really see any visitors other than our usual Mr. Waller in the audience. But if anybody would like to speak, that you must complete a comment form. There are slips outside the table outside the door on the table. And I would also like to note that we will take up agenda item number 17 right after agenda item number 7 today. Mr. Slagle has a Senate committee hearing for agency legislation that he needs to get to, and so we're going to let him do his piece before too long so he can get out the door. I have asked Ms. Robinson to open our meeting with our mission moment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I was drafting this, I wanted to really draft it from the heart. I mean, I feel like we are really like one of the top states in terms of what we do and for our industry and for the people that we serve. So that's where this is coming from. What an amazing honor it has been to serve our state as a member of the Texas Appraisal Licensing and Certification Board. I've had the pleasure and opportunity to work alongside the best in the industry. From our board members to our amazing leaders, and of course our team here, our staff, that has made all of this happen. As we work to protect the public interest and ensure the highest standards of professionalism and ethics in our appraisal industry in Texas, we continue striving to safeguard consumers of real estate appraisal services through oversight and regulation. There is no doubt that our industry is starting to see a shift in consumer trust, whether it's related to appraisal bias, lack of industry diversity, or overall fair housing practices. But let us not forget, we are accountable to the people of Texas, and we strive to be worthy stewards of this agency. We remain committed to maintaining rigorous qualifications and professionalism while streamlining regulations and processes to reduce burdens for our license holders. Ethical practice by Texas appraisers is paramount, and we employ fair and instructive disciplinary strategies to uphold these principles. In our commitment to consumer protection, we actively craft policies that support the health and growth of the appraisal industry in Texas. We are vigilant in identifying and addressing burdensome regulation, cumbersome licensing requirements and fees, and heavy-handed enforcement, always seeking positive change for the betterment of our industry. Innovation and rectification of any shortcomings are integral in our mission. We, as board members, embrace our dual roles as policymakers and oversight authorities. Through our dedication, integrity, and commitment, we work towards the advancement and improvement of the appraisal industry in Texas, ensuring the trust and confidence of consumers and the public. I would like to thank all of you for participating in this process of making Texas the best state for the appraisal industry. Again, I am honored to serve with you and look forward to better things to come. Thank you so much for your time, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Robinson. Very, very well said.
Absolutely.
This takes us to agenda item number 4. Governor Abbott recently reappointed Mr. Castro to the board. As a reminder, he stepped in for Jim Jeffries, for Jim Jeffries, who, for the end of his term, and so you're officially starting a new full term. So we appreciate you recommitting to the board. And Governor Abbott also appointed John Eichelberger to the board here after he previously served on the AMC committee from 2019 until earlier this year. So he is a familiar face to us, and we are very grateful that you have volunteered to join the board. Mr. Eichelberger comes to us from Houston, where he is a partner at Schwartz, Page, and Harding. And so Mr. Eichelberger is replacing Mr. Black, who couldn't be with us today. He had a kid graduating, and so he couldn't be with us today. And so he will come to the August board meeting, and at that time, we will recognize him and thank him formally for his service. And so we will get to see him again then. In that same vein, which takes us to agenda item number 5, which is after consultation with Mr. Eichelberger, I'm appointing him to the Enforcement Committee where Mr. Black was previously serving. And so I certainly appreciate his willingness to jump right in. That we do a lot of good work on at the committee level, so I appreciate that. Thank you. The next item is an opportunity for anyone to speak. We haven't received any requests to speak from the public, but as a reminder, this item is for anything that's not on the agenda. So anything that you don't see that we're going to be discussing today, this would be an opportunity to speak for that. Having no request at this time, we will move on to agenda item number 7, the ratification of the official record of the February 3rd, 2023 board meeting as approved for posting on the website by the Secretary of the Board. And this can be found on page 7 of our materials. And I will ask if there are any changes. If not, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the board ratifies the minutes of the February 3rd, 2023 board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Robinson and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. That brings us to our shifted item number 17, which is an update regarding legislative matters from Mr. Slagle.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Tony Slagle, Deputy Commissioner. Thank you for bumping me up. The Senate Business and Commerce Committee is hearing a bunch of bills today. Several of them are, well, not several, but about 4 of them we're tracking. 2 of them are of import to the agency, and I just wanted to give you an update on the legislature in general, and then we'll talk about a couple of the bills that are up, or at least one of the bills that's up this morning. So I sent out a report, I believe last Wednesday. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any questions about updates on any of that, but otherwise I just wanted to point out a few bills of interest. SB 1222, which was the legislative initiatives bill for the board, is on its way to is in the at the governor's office. It passed both houses without any issue and has been sent over to the governor's office for his consideration, which is a good thing. Another bill we were tracking, just to highlight it, was SB 510, which is applicable to occupational licensing entities in general, and it deals with specifically with confidentiality of certain information and what we can and cannot disclose. and that is also on its way to the governor's office. That's in your report if you want any additional information about it. As of last night, I was prepared to let you all know that HB 1518 by Darby, which is the bill dealing with AMC reporting requirements, there hadn't been any action taken on it. It had just been referred to Senate Business and Commerce. Tomorrow, I believe, was the last day for that bill to be heard. It actually was put on the Business and Commerce Committee today, so that bill is going to be heard this morning sometime or this afternoon. So as I said, I was going to tell you that bill was likely dead, but it looks like it still is alive. So I wanted to let you know that. And then just to highlight a couple other things, there is a bill that this doesn't really, it impacts the board in a different way than it does the commission, but it allows military spouses currently military spouses are eligible to practice in Texas under their authority of a license elsewhere, and just come into the state, notify the agency, and they can do that. This bill expands that to the active military member as well. Just a little distinction between reciprocity, which is currently and I know you probably know this, but just for the record, which is currently in play for appraiser boards. This is portability, which means they don't have to get a license. They can work under the authority of their license in other states. So they just come into the state, notify us, and can do that. So there are substantially equivalent requirements for that bill, but I don't believe those apply to appraiser license holders because of the reciprocity agreement and the federal oversight. Any questions about any of that? Okay, I think that might be it in terms of bills that I wanted to highlight. Again, I'm happy to answer anything about any of the bills that are on our report or any bills that you may have seen that I can possibly answer a question about if you have any.
I do have a question, Madam Chair, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see there, and thank you for the legislative report. It is very thorough, detailed, and it's exactly what we need.
You're
So
welcome.
I appreciate it. Appreciate you keeping us in the loop. Let's see, House Bill 4654 relating to providing for reduction in total number of state agency rules. So if this passes, it does it requires us to post our agency rules, if I understand correctly, and then there's also an area where it talks about how we will reduce 10% of the number of those rules.
I
Can you
believe
speak
that bill is dead. Can you give me the number again and I'll look it up?
Sure,
I'm sorry.
it's House Bill 4654, dealing with rules and regulations that we have for our,
I'm sorry, one more time.
I'm sorry, House Bill 4654 by Hayes. It was on our last legislative report you sent us.
Yes, ma'am. That bill has actually not even had a hearing yet, so it's the likelihood it could technically get attached as an amendment, but I don't think so. I think that bill is likely dead.
Okay, thank you for that. And then there was another one that caught my eye that deals with our finances, of course. Let's see, House Bill 760 by Goodwin relating to the monthly amount of longevity pay for state employees. You have a note here that it will impact the agency salary and wages. What I found, and then also the second one under that, House Bill 202 by House Bill 202 relating to the pay raise of certain employees. You have a note there that caught my eye that they did not separate applying this for SDSI agencies like ourselves. So is this going to affect us, do you think?
Both of those bills are also dead.
Those are dead, okay. All right.
Any bill that's highlighted in yellow is dead on
Okay.
the report. They either didn't have a hearing or they failed to meet a calendar deadline.
Okay, wanted to clarify. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I know that the last days of session are extraordinarily stressful for somebody in your position. And so I want to thank you for your hard work, and the fact that our bill is already at the governor's office is a huge win for us. And so we want to recognize that and thank you for that.
Thank you. I think at one point that bill was noted as being the bill that moved through the legislature faster than any other bill,
Oh.
our appraiser bill. So I guess nobody had any issues with it. So.
Well, that's great. We always think there are not going to be any issues, and then some very random
Yes,
thing
yes, ma'am.
pops up that, wait, no one had considered, so.
Unpredictable.
Yeah,
So,
very good. Thank you so much. We
thank you.
appreciate it.
All right.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will get back on track with agenda item number 8, which is the report by the TREC and TALC Joint Audit Committee. Mr. Bolton is on the Joint Audit Committee. The report is included in our materials on page 12. Is there anything that you would like to highlight for us?
I don't think so.
Okay, very good. Is the Joint Audit Committee, is it still meeting fairly regularly? You've met since our last board meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
at one time.
And it will continue sort of quarterly, is that?
I think it will be almost quarterly. There may be occasions where there are 2 audit committees in committee meetings in a quarter, depending on what's happening with audits, because the committee wants to see draft reports before they are finalized. And so it kind of depends on the timing of when the audits conclude and when those draft reports are ready.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Castro, the Education Committee report is included in our materials on page 14. Is there anything that you would like to highlight?
No, I agree with the report as written.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton, the Enforcement Committee is on page 17 in our materials.
I would like to point out, we did have a very robust, interesting conversation with the Texas Workforce Commission Civil Rights Division, which we partnered with in cases of alleged bias. I think we're going to be looking at this pretty intensely over probably the next year, is just to see how that process works and what if there is a sanction, say by the TWC, how does that impact what we do? How does that impact our investigations? And I think we're very early into this process, but it's something that we really look forward to finding out, refining, and making a better, continually better process.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was very nice for them to come and kind of give us the rundown of how that works, because it gives us such a better idea of how we can work together and what their role is and what our role is, and how we can make the process better for everyone, for both the consumers and appraisers. So we definitely appreciate them making time to attend that meeting. Thank you, Mr. Bolton. And the Executive Committee report is in our materials on page 19. The one thing that I would like to highlight from that, and I assume Director Tran that we'll probably be discussing this as part of her staff reports, but that we talked about the ASC priority contact, and so that is, because we'll discuss that later, we can get into that, but that was definitely an interesting part of our meeting. Does anybody have any questions about the committee meeting reports? Very good. That takes us on to agenda item number 12. Oh, we're still on committee reports. I apologize. The Budget Committee. We usually do executive last, so it was switched up here. Kat likes to keep me on my toes. The budget materials are on page 21. Ms. Robinson, is there anything that you would like to highlight for us?
I think the report speaks very well for what we did in our meeting. I do encourage the board to really take a look at the draft budget, and I would love to have y'all's input. There are some things that were pointed out dealing with a decrease in licensing for trainees, that we had a significant decrease in that. Although I think we're going to be okay based on our conversations, the agency is fine. It's just really take a look at that, and I welcome anybody's feedback, even after the board meeting. If you have any feedback, questions, or things you want us to discuss in budget, you can send it to Kathleen. Would that be appropriate? So that she can get that on the agenda, because I would love to hear y'all's opinion on how we draft the budget for next year.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for keeping your eye on the runway into the agency, which is our trainees.
Absolutely.
Very good. Any other questions on the committee reports? Okay, now we will move to agenda item number 13, staff reports on agency operations, initiatives, and statistical data. Commissioner Buchholz. Good morning.
Tell who was here before me. I have to pull this microphone way down. I blame Tony. Welcome to our new board member, John Eichelberger. I'm delighted that you have joined this board. It's no small thing to decide to serve in this way. So thank you for saying yes to this call. I look forward to just the wisdom and insights that I know you'll bring. And Mr. Castro, congratulations on another 6 years with us, or for 6 full years, I should say, with us. We are really excited that you, yeah, you're locked in for a generation, maybe. We're excited that just these appointments have been made and that we're kind of settling in with a full board. So, and I also look forward to celebrating Clayton Black when he comes in August. This has been a full season with the convergence of some conference travel for Aero and Arello and a few other speaking engagements. We've had a strong start to our regulatory database implementation. That is pulling a lot of time from the staff to just make sure that's a success. It's the end of the legislative session. We have new commissioners and new board member. The end of the school year for many of us with young families. But with the fullness of the calendar, I think for the most part shows the fullness of life. So we celebrate that. I'll start with our conference travel with Aero, and by talking to you about what happened at Aero, I kind of hit all the high points of many other things happening at the agency. So I thought I'd start there. Melissa Tran, Marjorie Caldwell, Kathleen Santos, and myself joined Paola Escalante Castillo and Stephanie Robinson at Aero in Savannah just last week, though that seems like a lifetime ago. So much has happened. The conference was the largest in Aero's history, with about 200 people there, which they celebrated, and I consider a good sign that just you have an active industry of regulators that seek to share information and to learn from each other. It was a great environment. I'll mention a few of the staff highlights. I know those who attended on the board will have an opportunity a little bit later in the meeting to give your highlights as well. First, Piraea. There were brief demonstrations shown by the 2 Piraea providers that we know of, McKissick and the Appraisal Institute. The Appraisal Institute announced a launch date of September of this year. And they are running a pilot program for Piraea-ready states, of which Texas is included. McKissick is set to launch next year, in 2024. So as an aside, not announced at Aero, but just earlier this week, or maybe even just yesterday, there was an announcement by AI that their program was approved by the AQB. So still a launch in September, but there is an approval. So we're ready for Piraea. We look forward to seeing these certificates of completions come in. We're poised and ready for that to happen. The AI, there should be opportunity for some small group of Texans to be part of this pilot program through AI. Okay, updates from the ASC. Back to Aero. We were able to meet the new grants director. We were highly anticipating the arrival or the hiring of that position to kind of see where those grants would head. We were able to meet her. They did put out a notice of funding availability for that ASC grant. It will be issued in the first quarter of the federal fiscal year, which begins in October. So we are preparing, staff are preparing to submit a grant proposal, and we'll be bringing ideas to the appropriate committees on what that grant looks like. The funding amount will be the same as the last go-round, $120,000 available each year for 3 years. The ASC is focused on appraisal bias, of course, and the PAVE Task Force action plan. They're holding a second public meeting on appraisal bias today during this meeting with a focus on appraisal regulatory system. So we will we will be able to get a report on how that meeting went, but of course could not attend. Texas is ahead on this issue. We saw that clearly at Arrow, and especially through our partnership with the Texas Workforce Commission. Melissa and Brian Snoddy, who is the Civil Rights Director at the Texas Workforce Commission, served on a panel at Arrow to highlight this Texas partnership. It was very well received. And as an aside, sitting in the audience, it was very fun to just watch them shine. It was like they were famous for a day. They were crowded with people wanting to ask questions at the end. They received some very well-deserved recognition just for their creativity. So I'm really proud of their efforts. There was also an update at Arrow from the Appraisal Foundation, including the Appraisal Standards Board. That Standards Board adopted the 2024 USPAP, which becomes effective January 1st of 2024. The big changes there is that there's no end date, so that was an exciting celebration. And then there was also some updates to the ethics rule related to non-discrimination. So of course, USPAP already prohibits bias, but there's a new section that makes that more explicit, and then some related advisory opinions to go with that. There were also some changes related to the definition of personal inspection and transfers. The Appraisal Qualifications Board, also, we've got some reports on that. Qualifications Board voted to issue a second exposure draft on bias appraiser education. AQB does not anticipate any major changes. This is what they said at Arrow, but wants to clarify the requirements and changes to the deadlines based on the feedback from states. Now, as an aside, that exposure draft was issued earlier this week, and Kat's going to provide an update on that. So lots of moving parts going on. So that's what we heard at Arrow. It was as is normal at these conferences, there was a lot of productivity in the in-between. We were able to visit with representatives from Florida and from California to compare notes. Kind of those hallway conversations I see as very productive and really kind of a worthy, it really justifies that travel, in my opinion. As you asked about earlier, Chair Oates, we recently had an ASC priority contact visit. This is sort of the in-between, the visit we have with him in the in-between years, in between our kind of larger audit. Tom Lewis, our new policy manager, reported that he feels confident that Texas program is running, these are his words, exceptionally and compliantly. They had several questions for us on how we have reduced our audit turnaround times, how we've seen success in handling the AMC National Registry, and how we've been able to keep up with the complaint volume. We shared all of those resources with ASC, with Tom, in these areas, and there were no areas of concern. He did mention in that meeting, and since we have received some resolution around this, that they are doing, ASC is doing a review of state requirements that go over and above ASC requirements. And ultimately, they agreed, and this was just about in the last week, that we had no worthy areas in which we exceeded requirements. So they will be issuing a report to the PAVE task force next month, and Texas will be shown as not exceeding any requirements. You will see some rule changes in the coming months to reflect some kind of tweaks in how we do things to make sure we are reflecting in our rules more accurately our practice, to ensure that we're even in our rules not exceeding any of those requirements. I know that's true in practice, and that's why we got to the resolution we did. Really just one more update. The TALCB notebook, the application portal. We've concluded all of our beta testing, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with 100% of the participants reporting that they would recommend the portal to other trainees. We're in the process of updating our communications efforts and updating the website to let people know that it's ready for use. So that was a big, heavy lift, and we're excited about the progress made in that regard. I'll direct you to the executive summary of all of our staff reports on page 23. There are no new trends that I want to point you to. It's more of the same from the last quarter. Our call hold time is holding steady at about 1 minute and 20 seconds. Our trainee applications are down. That is not new. Our complaints are down. That is not new. We seem to be on trend with the market. These folks behind me are ready, willing, and able to step up and explain all of their data in great detail. But so as not to just bore you, I will sit down unless you have questions for me or anyone else.
Do we know what the cost of PREA is for the Institute being the first one out the gate? Does anybody have
Don't
that
know that we have received a confirmation of that. 5,000? Okay.
5,000. Okay, very good. And I do see on one of the bullet points on page 23 is about the 58% decrease in trainee applications that Ms. Robinson mentioned earlier, and that we are developing communications to provide to trainees to, make sure that any that are thinking about, I just can't keep up with this, that they know that that's coming in September. And of course, we want to mention that McKissick is expected in 2024, so that we, provide that kind of marketing, if you will, for all of our education providers. But I think that needs to be a sooner than later thing, because I just, everyone that drops out is a potential license holder that, that we're losing. It's a potential appraiser in an area that's underserved. And so we want to make sure that now that we have a date, that we can tell the trainees about that. And if they're frustrated with the current process, let them know that there is a new process and it's coming in September. So that's very exciting.
One thing to mention on that is that I think and I think we're cognizant in how we communicate this to license holders or to trainees, that this is probably going to be a slow rollout, in that there are a lot of people who want to start right at the beginning, and the class size will be somewhat limited. So we know that AI has a long list of people that are interested in being part of that pilot, and it's many more than who will be able to be part of that pilot. So we're going to try to kind of balance that until we know kind of what the numbers look like, so as not to just build expectation for.
Absolutely, and frustrate the process even further. I agree. Do we know how many other states are, what do they call it, PREA ready?
I think we said 20. Is 20?
Oh, 20. So that's probably the
list is long.
The cross section between the people that want to do it and the 20 states, especially if it's big states like Texas, is probably pretty long. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I did want to mention also with the use PAP changes, just as sort of a PSA for license holders, that I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. We get so used to the way that we do things, and so anytime there is a use PAP change, which used to be every 2 years, and now thank goodness it's not, but there weren't major changes other than the non-discrimination, the addition of the non-discrimination section, which again was already in there and should have been part of the ethics of a practicing appraiser, but they have separated it out to make it more clear, which I certainly appreciate. I wanted to mention that there was a lot of draft language in the mini exposure drafts about inspection, because now there's drones and there's people that do inspections for you. There's all different things. So they tried to clarify it, and it appears as though that personal inspection, the current definition, is a physical observation, and the new definition is an in-person observation. So that's I guess what they settled on clarifying that, the difference between those two things. The transfers that the commissioner mentioned is just in the past, in the 3-year history that we're required to report. We used to talk about sales and listings and that sort of things, and they have added transfers in there, because sometimes it's just an entity name transfer, but it needs to be explained, and so that was clarified. That, I don't think that that's a huge deal, but that could be something different that appraisers aren't used to doing at this point, because we don't always report on transfers. There is one thing that I would like from the use PAP changes that I would like for the Education Committee to take up, and that is, there was a comment added to the definition of appraiser, and it is somewhat convoluted. I've read it 17 times, but it's one of those sentences that I'm not quite sure what parts need to go with the other parts. So I just want to make sure that it's consistent with our rules and statutes, and that that there's no changes needed for us on that. So
Excellent.
It's not a change to the definition, but they added a comment after the definition of appraiser. So we'll just
we'll put it on the agenda.
I appreciate that. Very good. Anything else for the commissioner? Does anybody know, is the spring Aero conference typically more widely attended than the fall conference? I always thought the fall conference was the big conference. Nobody here has been around long enough to know.
I assumed the fall was the big conference too, but I think my assumption is based on how Avarello does it. They call it their mid-year in the spring and then the annual conference in the fall. I don't know if ERA is the same. It's in Salt Lake City, I believe in September or October, if
Oh, okay.
anyone would like to go.
Oh, that's right. They're not doing it in DC every fall anymore.
That's right.
Okay, very
Go
good.
someplace new.
So Salt Lake City in the fall, for anybody that's interested in going. Any other questions for the commissioner? Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, I have a couple questions, and maybe our staff can help support as well. Under the licensing division, I see that there's, staff is developing communication to trainees that provide information on alternative methods of gaining experience, which is great. Do we have any timeline on when these communication pieces will be developed? Who are we sending it to? Who are we targeting? Are we working with colleges and universities, associations? Just a better idea on kind of how we're going to roll that out.
That's along the same lines that the chair mentioned relating to the rollout of Perea in September. And so I think we're waiting to see what that class size will be, how kind of weighing the frustration of those who will not be able to be part of that class with, pushing people who could be. I think we'll probably do that fairly slowly until we have more information about how many can be a part of it.
So the push for getting more trainees in the pipeline, which I think is extremely important to make sure we keep that nice and solid, is going to be mostly tied to the Perea launch and information for that.
For now.
Okay.
And then there's a few other avenues that we are working at that are in just the infancy stages that we can work through in committee to further broaden that pipeline. But we're several clicks away from, we need to develop those more fully and then create a communications plan.
Okay, very good. Okay, so that's good on that. And then on the enforcement bullets, it looks like we had fiscal year 2022, 331 complaints, and then it shows 146 for this fiscal year. Do you happen to have the numbers year to date? Because I'm assuming that 331 complaints is for the entire fiscal year of 2022. But do we know where we stand in terms of?
Year to date?
Yeah.
I bet we can pull it, but are those numbers through March?
Those numbers are from March, yeah.
Okay, so you're,
So the 146 that we're looking at and the 331, it is to March on both years?
No,
Oh.
not to March through both years, but the average is there too. So 27 average in last fiscal year,
21, yeah.
or 28 average last fiscal year, 21 this fiscal year.
Okay.
7 less on average.
Okay. And then I wanted to look at too, as I looked at the staff reports for enforcement and complaints, I noticed we have a huge portion of dismissals, which is fine as long as we're just, I'm sure you guys are dismissing it for the right reasons. But is that our rate of dismissals, is that similar to other state agencies and their rate of dismissals? I want to, from a consumer protection perspective, I want to make sure that the dismissals we're doing is still protecting the consumers that are filing those complaints. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That is something that we can research and talk about at the enforcement committee meeting. It's a little bit tricky because each state has a different definition of what they consider a filed complaint. So it's going to take a lot of research, but I think that's something that we can
Would that
take.
be okay if we brought that up and then brought it back to the board?
No, I'd be happy to explore that in the committee.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Sure, of course.
I think that's all I had. I did want to point out the excellent work that we've done in terms of our numbers staying below processing times. I think in every area of our operation, our numbers have been outstanding in terms of staying below our benchmarks. So thank you guys very much for your hard work on that. That's all I have. Thank you.
And I would say, to sort of piggyback again on the comment of the communications to the trainees, maybe we get with the Institute and ask them what their plan is, and then that can be part of the communication also, so that if there are people, if there is more demand than there is supply, that we have something to tell them about what will the future supply be. So are they letting, 20 people in September and then 20 in October, or what's their plan, so that we can, I just feel like these people have been through, they've paid a lot for this education, they've done a lot to try and get into the industry, and so if they know that they might be on a pause right now, but that it's only going to be a month or 2 months or 6 months, whatever it is, maybe it encourages them to stay in the process and not abandon completely. So I think the more information that we can give them about that rollout and what the Appraisal Institute, and even if we can get some information from McKissick, like when in 2024, so just as much information that we can give them, I think would be better.
That's a really good point, and I would add to that, can we start looking at opportunities for scholarships? Because financial barriers going to kick in once the PREA rolls out. So, the whole purpose of PREA is to reduce barriers of entry. So if we can start thinking proactively on what scholarship opportunities we can share with our incoming trainees or potential trainees, that would be great. During Aero, I did meet a gentleman that is very involved in, I think, 2 different organizations that focus on African Americans in the appraisal industry on a nationwide level. And I believe he mentioned that they have scholarship opportunities for, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe there were scholarship opportunities. So if we can maybe take a look at that proactively, so we're ready to go and get that information dispersed, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Melissa, I have a question. Is the general thinking, whether this be from the ASC or the agency, that PREA is going to take over the traditional trainee model? Is that something we need to be thinking about, planning to make those changes?
Yeah, I think we've been thinking about that at the Budget Committee meeting and also at the Education and Licensing Committee meeting. One of the things that I want to point out is for the general certification, you still have to get 50% of traditional experience. So it's not going to completely go away, at least for commercial appraisers.
Right. But okay, so if we're focusing on residential, which obviously that's the majority of where the trainees are headed, is there a thinking that down the road, once PREA gets established, that we're going to greatly reduce the trainee model?
I don't know that we know enough to say yet, but I think it's definitely something that has been talked about in the industry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Director Tran, are you going to do is there any staff report on your side?
Nope.
There wasn't. Okay. Well, but before you leave, though, I did want to sort of, I guess it's really an expansion of the comments from the commissioner, but I know that you were the one who worked with the ASC on, working through those, are we compliant? Obviously, in the state of Texas, our goal is to be as low regulation as possible. And so the fact that we came out with we're consistent with the federal minimum requirements of the feds is fantastic. And I look forward to the rule changes that we're going to need to make just to, like you said, align our rules more in with our practice to make sure that happens. But there wasn't any other highlight from those conversations that the board needs to be aware of, or we're just going to sort of parse them out into the different committees and dig into any of those at that time. Okay, very good. And at some point we will see how we compare to other states when they issue their report. Okay.
I heard at Aero, I think there's only a handful of states that can say they don't exceed the AQB criteria.
Very good. Way to go, Texas. I look forward to, when you see that report, if you'll make sure that we get a copy of it. Again, like Stephanie said, we like to know how we compare to other states, so we always want to be doing our best.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Any other questions for the Commissioner or Director Tran? Thank you. Agenda item number 14 is an executive session, and we don't have a need for executive session today, so we will be moving right along to agenda item number 15, which is the report on the Aero conference. Ms. Escalante Castillo obviously is not here, and the other attendee was Ms. Robinson, so if there's anything that we haven't already discussed from the Aero conference that you would like to highlight for us.
Yes, sure. I think the Commissioner did a great job of highlighting all of the main points that were focused on in Arrow. My only addition to that, because yeah, everything she covered was dead on. My only addition to that is, man, I wish I would have been there because Director Tran killed it. I mean, when I say that session was lively, well-attended, active, interactive questions, people standing up asking questions because they just want the knowledge. And I was so proud to be part of this team. Like, she really made us shine in Texas, and as well as your partner with TWC. I just could not be prouder. I was so proud of how you represented our state, and I so appreciate it. And what I came out of this realizing, because I also attended the meeting for just the board members, and what I saw was that we really are leading this. I mean, of course, we still have work to do, right? We still have work to do in terms of diversity and education and bias and all those things. But based on the board meetings that I attended, as well as the session that Director Tran had, we really are shining in Texas in our efforts, and I could not be prouder. So she did a great job representing our state. You guys will be proud.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I was thinking that when the commissioner was speaking, that Director Tran, at some point you had the idea to search for this connection, and you made it, and it's, become this thing. And so you should be proud of yourself for that. But we're certainly proud that you represent our agency well in that endeavor. So thank you.
Just to add to that, since your presentation, I have gotten several emails from other states asking for information on how we do it. So it's really resonating, people are really taking that in. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Robinson. We appreciate you attending during this busy time of year. That takes us to agenda item number 16, which is the update regarding comments submitted in response to the AQB's exposure draft for proposed changes to the criteria. This is on page 56 in our materials. Ms. Santos, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Just get situated here. So today I just have a little bit of an update on the exposure draft and where we are and where we are since our last meeting. If you recall, at the last meeting, the board delegated authority to the Education and Licensing Committee to finalize comments to submit to the AQB regarding that first exposure draft. And as Commissioner Buchholz mentioned, the second exposure draft was released not 48 hours ago, so it is fresh, hot off the press. And I do have a high-level summary of the changes, but I will qualify that with, we haven't had a whole lot of time to sit and contemplate all the changes, but I do have my impression of the changes and potential impact for us. Straight to the point, I don't know that there's a significant enough difference between the first exposure draft for us administratively in terms of the need for comments, but I'll give you all an update of where we are and what's changed. So I think the biggest change is the effective date. They've pushed it forward a year to January 1st, 2026. And the rationale for that was this was in response to comments from the ASC and other states saying we need more time to implement these changes because every state's a little bit different. They've got to update their laws or they've got to update the rules, and this just gives enough runway for everybody to implement the changes. For as far as the changes, and I'll back up a little bit and summarize what those initial exposure drafts covered. The first big change was the changes to qualifying education, and that was to add 8 hours of qualifying education on the topics of valuation bias and fair housing laws and regulations for all license types. That qualifying education, that hasn't changed from draft to draft. It's still going to be 8 hours. It's still going to result in 8 additional hours for our trainee and licensed residential license categories, and then no net additional hours for our general license categories. It's just going to be taken from elective hours that were already allocated there. The next difference is related to continuing education. It's still going to be a 7-hour requirement. They've just sort of phrased it a little bit differently, as opposed to the 7-hour requirement needing to be completed by a date certain. It's just that you've got a requirement, the first one that you take needs to be that 7-hour course. So they've kind of phrased it a little bit differently based on that new effective date. And then after everyone's taken that 7 hours, it'll be 4 hours every 2 years, every 2 calendar years after that. And an additional language they added that I think is significant is that they state that if you've taken this course as part of qualifying education, then you've satisfied that 7-hour requirement and you'd only be required to take the 4 hours moving forward.
Wait, can you repeat that?
The addition of the course to qualifying education and continuing education, it's the same course, there's just an exam. And so they added some language that says, if you took that as part of your qualifying, you satisfied that first prong, and you're just gonna have to take those 4 hours.
Is the 4 hours different, or was that the way it was in the original draft?
That's how it was. I think it was designed to be like an initial on-loading course, and then a refresher course is the 4
I
hours.
see, okay. Because 4 hours of the 28 minus the 7 use path isn't obviously as impactful as 7. I mean, it's negligible, but it's still, when you consider that reduces your hours of electives.
And then, there were other relatively minor changes. A lot of it was just like name changes and sort of rationale, but like those ones that I mentioned were the big ones. The AQB, this happened the last exposure draft, they're hosting a webinar on June 1st to discuss the draft, and they'll be accepting comments through June 17th. And they've also scheduled a meeting on June 22nd with the intention of adopting the changes. And I just, for everyone watching, if you go to the exposure draft is included in supplemental materials in front of you, but if you go to the foundation website, look under the exposure drafts, the first few pages, there's links on there that show you how to register and join all the webinars, and also for the public meeting if anyone wished to attend. That's all the information that I have. Does anyone have any questions or anything on the updates?
I think if it was substantially the same, that it's probably not necessary for us to weigh in again. I guess, Ms. Robinson, they didn't heed our request to be more bold.
That's all right. Gotta try.
But that's right, we had to try. Okay, very good. Any other questions for Ms. Santos on this? Very good, thank you, ma'am. Agenda item number 17, of course, we covered earlier. So we will move to agenda item number 18. Discussion and possible action regarding the TALCB fiscal year 2024 draft budget and final administration policy and investment policy. This, of course, was sent to the board members under separate cover. Ms. Williams, good morning.
Good morning. I know this. I know. Good morning. Renata Williams, Chief Financial Officer for the record. The documents have been provided to you under separate cover. The Budget Committee met on April the 19th, and they reviewed and provided feedback to the first draft of the budget that was prepared on April the 5th. And as you know, the budget before you will change as we fine-tune our projections and update expenditures for operations. As such, no motion is required to approve the budget today. This is just an opportunity to inform the board that staff are in the process of drafting our annual budget and will continue to work with the Budget Committee on the final draft. As you look through the budget document, you will see that our revenue projections fluctuate heavily in the even-numbered years due to the number of AMCs that are scheduled to renew during those years. You will also notice that our expenditure projections currently account for a 3% performance-based merit and a 2% across-the-board increase for all employees. As a result of this increase, there's a slight increase in the other personnel cost category for the employee benefits. You will notice in our professional fees and services, there's a decrease due to the grant-funded contractor term expiring. It wasn't until last week that the appraisal subcommittee confirmed that there will be another grant opportunity starting in October 2023 with a maximum award of the $120,000 per year for 3 years, and the agency intends to apply for those grant funds. The only other outlier that you'll notice in the budget document will be a slight increase in our other operating expenses category, where we're going to invest in the Alamode software for our team, and for an increase in our interagency contracts for our criminal history and background checks through DPS. The budget and financial administration policy was reviewed, and there were no changes made to that policy, as well as the investment policy. It was reviewed as well, and it's included as a part of the annual requirement of the Public Funds Investment Act. We are making great strides. We are fine-tuning the projections. We'll continue to work with the Budget Committee over the summer to develop the second draft of the 2024 budget to present to the full board in August. Do we have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
The ASC grants, each grant is 120,000?
Yes, ma'am.
And in the past, there has been, at some times, that we could apply for 2 at one time.
We applied for a supplemental for that, for, was it 1 or 2 years? The second year? Yeah, the second year we applied for a supplemental, and they approved that.
Okay.
And that's why we were able to receive more.
And so do we think that there is going to be an opportunity for additional grant money beyond the 120 in the future?
I think we're always going to continue to try
Yeah,
and push and ask for it,
Right.
because, of course, they're telling everybody 120, but I think once we present them what we're trying to do and why we need it, maybe they'll give in. We don't know at this time.
Yeah,
though.
okay, yeah, I think that's a good plan. And especially with the fact that they haven't been giving out grants since they've been without a grant director, and that AMC registry money just keeps piling up, so. Can you tell me more about the Alamode software that we're investing in for, I assume that's for enforcement staff?
Yes, ma'am. Melissa. Excuse me.
For those of you public members, Alamode is a software company that does provide software for residential report writing. I don't think they do commercial. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn on that, but it's pretty ubiquitous in the marketplace.
Yeah, so we're not doing appraisal reports. I think the main reason that I wanted to get a subscription was one of the features that it has that we've been hearing from our license holders is it'll pull comps. So when we talk about like what would your peers do, I kind of just wanted to see what information that could provide.
Oh, interesting. Okay, very good. Okay. Do we have any other questions for Ms. Williams about the budget? Okay, and so remind me, and then this will go back to Budget Committee, and then at the August meeting, we will be finalizing it?
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
That's the timeline?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good.
I just encourage you guys, again, to take a look at that, deep look at that. If you have any comments, please send that over to Kathleen so we can get that on the Budget Committee meeting. Because we do want you guys to have input in that before we approve it in August, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Williams. That takes us to agenda item number 19, discussion and possible action regarding possible topics for the November workshop. Are there any topics offhand that any board members would like to throw out today? If not, then I would just ask for the next round of committee meetings that we put that as an agenda item, so that at the committee meetings, if something comes up, that we are sort of thinking about that if it needs to be a workshop topic for November. Hearing none, we will move to agenda item number 20, discussion and possible action regarding agenda items for future meetings. I didn't have any carryovers from today's meeting. Anything that we need to mention, Ms. Santos? Nothing from the board. Agenda item number 21 is discussion and possible action to schedule future meeting dates. Calendars, of course, are on the last page of our materials. Want to make notice to Mr. Eichelberger that we have previously set a date of August 18th and November 9th and 10th for our next two board meetings, and then in November it's 2 days because we have a workshop the day before our of the board meeting. So I want to confirm those dates with everyone, and if there is a conflict, just email us. I'm sure that you weren't prepared for me to put you on the spot on that. But we can also tentatively set a date for the February board meeting. So I would throw out the weekend of the 16th through 19th is President's Day. And so typically the kids have off on Monday and a lot of people have off on Monday. So maybe we don't want to put it on the 16th, but maybe the 23rd would be a better date. So Friday, February 23rd. Does anyone have any potential conflicts with that day? Does that work for any conflicts within the agency? No. We're not. 23rd. I looked on the Trek schedule and didn't see that they have scheduled that far out. 12, 13. Okay. Oh, very good. Okay. That works out well then, I think. Okay, so we will set a tentative date for February 23rd, 2024. Had to think about that. For the February meeting. Very good. Again, Mr. Eichelberger, our meetings are not always this quick. I think you heard earlier that sometimes they go till 3 in the afternoon, and we've tried to avoid that. But sometimes there's a lot of things that we need to take care of. So today was not one of those days, which is great during this busy time of year. And let the staff get back to finishing up the legislative session, which is always an interesting time at this point in the process. And so I just want everybody to have a great weekend and enjoy this time, like the commissioner said, with your families, this very full time of life that's busy but is full of sadness and excitement for graduates and things ending and new things beginning. And so everybody have a great weekend. The time is 10:03 and this meeting is adjourned.
Good job.